Welcome everyone. Oh, that was the knock now. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the February 8th Planning and Zoning meeting. I guess I'll call the meeting to order. It's 7:02 p.m. Let's see. Looks like our first agenda item is approval of the January 25th minutes. Are there any subtractions, additions, anything?
Me.
Is there a motion?
Yep, I'll second. I was
Right.
there.
Motion by Victoria, second by Sue. We got to do a roll call vote.
Oh, yeah.
So let's see. Sue,
Aye.
Victoria, no,
Aye.
Cole, and I.
Do we have a quorum?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good, I do.
Cool.
All right. So let's see. I guess we need to move on to the second item, which is our public comment period. Members of the public who would like to speak to the commission regarding matters not on the agenda tonight or currently in front of council or
Board of Adjustments.
Board of Adjustments. That's the other one. Thank you. If anybody would like to speak, come up to the podium.
Woof. No.
Everybody-
We're students for a land use class, and we just wanted to come and observe.
Okay. Okay.
No, always
Well,
make
thanks for
comments.
being here. All right, so I guess we'll move on to our third agenda item, which is our update and discussion from Nils Peterson on the Affordable Housing Trust Project. Turn it over to you.
You've run it before.
Thank you. It's fun to be back. New faces, a little change around the table. And thank you also for giving Mike the time off to go get married and whatever else he's doing these days.
It was overdue.
Yeah, it was over. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you about my explorations of the challenges of building small houses. The happiness being that sold sign on the U Idaho house number 1. Took a while with lawyers and surveyors and everything to get to yes, but we got all of that out of the way and we closed on January 4.
Yay, yay.
Yay, that's right. And students are at work on house number 2. I was out talking to the concrete guy today. How much mud is in the bottom of the hole? It got dug in the fall and now he's trying to figure out pouring concrete in it. Anyway, just thought I would give you a little picture of how the money worked. These are the costs on the project. And I broke out just a few pieces. Up at the top there, permits and fees. And then, foundation. The labor in this case was pretty clearly broken out, as opposed to the framer who would be materials and labor. In this case, because it was the students who were being paid as laborers, we got a better picture of the labor. You see that lumber and siding were 12%. But as we come up around there to the 11 o'clock position on that, parking was 5% of the cost of this project. And that was to build 2 parking stalls.
Wow.
Right, so it becomes a significant piece of the fixed costs, the hard to shrink costs show up more in a smaller house. Because you don't have the other things that inflate the whole project.
Why are other costs such a big figure? I mean, what does that mean? Just give us a rough idea.
Water hookup.
Well, so the parking was $9,500. And why you can't make 2 parking spaces smaller or cheaper.
But I mean, the other costs figure that 37%.
Oh, okay. So there's sheetrock in there, there's cabinets, there's a whole bunch of, I decided I'm just not going to break out all of the interior finishes and pieces like
I
that.
see, okay.
Right. Otherwise, it'd been a lot more slices to the pie.
So other is really materials. Mostly.
Yes, right. It wasn't the plumbing, it was the cabinets, it was the countertops, it was the paint, it was The sheetrock, in fact, they actually ended up hiring a sheetrocker, which I think was a smart choice as opposed to student sheetrocking. So there's a bunch of things. That other is a lot of real things. Sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Yeah.
And then here's the other side of that. The sources of funding. The buyer paid 66% of the project costs. Latah County, that 15% is the land. And the land was cheap by today's standards at $29,000. I went looking the other day to see what you could buy a lot for here in Moscow, and there's one at 69 that I've looked at and thought, wow, that's a challenge.
What's the size of the lot for the tiny home?
It is using a half of a twin home lot. So
Okay.
It's 25 by 100.
Okay.
That much land got committed. It's actually sideways across two, and
Right,
there's
but-
other ones going to be sideways across the same two.
But it's still
But it consumed 2,500 square feet.
half of
So
the lot.
every one of these houses, if you end up building 6, will have their separate lot.
They are more like a PUD. They are going to be scattered in a campus, not on a legal lot.
Oh, okay.
And what you are getting is the footprint. So again, it feels like a condo.
Okay.
We have surveyed footprints for each of the foundations, and that's what's in the deed. There will be a feeling that a certain amount of territory around yours is yours. But you'll remember in the land trust model, the land trust owns all the land.
Mhm.
So there is no, we can measure lots in terms of land consumed, but not in terms of land owned.
Okay. Yeah, consumed or used in a different way, yeah.
Right,
But it's, they're like in a cluster. They're all in the same area.
correct. City of Moscow's contribution, I'll wink, wink at you, Cody.
The attorneys have it. They've assured me.
Attorneys assured me that
This week.
10% is coming. Some amount of.
What does that cover?
Um,
Permits, fees, or what?
Yeah, one way to look at it is that it is not exactly a match for, the city decided to give, first it was 10,000
I
per
see.
house, and then it was 10,000 pretty well lines up with permits and fees.
I see.
The 20,000 that they stepped up with ARPA money
Okay.
is bigger, so it doesn't line up with a city expense.
But that's really nice.
Right, but it
Yeah.
is certainly a big help. And then in this project, I went into it saying to my board, we will be at the table and we will get it across the finish line. 4% of the money
Wow.
came out of our hide because you can't not finish building a house. And we all learned tremendous amount. Students in their arena of learning and the lender and the faculty member and myself in our arena, things we would do differently to shrink down, to get the buyers more. My goal is the buyer mortgage is all only money going in. Because then we could turn the crank that we were really selling them for what it was costing. Well, it'd be buyer mortgage probably and the land, which this case was paid for by Latah County. Then we could turn the crank.
Turning the crank meaning,
Create houses faster. I
Thank-
have to raise 15, 20% or more in subsidy for every house. I'm out with my hand like this a lot of the time, and I can't commit to too many houses at once. If the buyer mortgage was almost all of that, then I wouldn't have to be doing so much fundraising. So that's the goal. Okay, now we're going to switch and talk money. Money. Let's do that. First of all is this. I want to thank the city. This is the 2018, you may have just seen, they came out with the newest citizen survey results. I did a public records request and got the raw data so that I could do some analysis on it. And I pulled out the households that earn between $20,000 and $50,000. I'm looking at the left-hand pie chart. And asked what was the household size of that group of respondents. 34% of them are single-person households, and 51% of them are two-person households. And the 25 to 50 is a little wider than the target demographic that I'm working in. I would say I'm more aimed at the 35 to 50 range. But so it's the audience that is 80% area median income or a bit lower and is part of Mossforce. I think there are a lot of jobs that pay in some of those ranges. Single-person households and two-person households make up 85% of all households in that income bracket. Now look at the right-hand pie chart. Thank you for the tax assessor's office records request. They gave me all of the houses in 83843 zip code and the number of bedrooms in each one. Oh, sorry. I will get back to the mic.
Thank you.
You betcha. So the number of bedrooms, the gray one on the lower right, the 2 o'clock to 7 o'clock piece of that pie is 3-bedroom houses. And then the next one, the 7 to 10 o'clock piece is 4-bedroom houses. So you can see there's a big mismatch between household size and number of bedrooms in houses in our current inventory. And we kind of know what those 3-bedroom houses are costing these days. 350 on up. That makes it harder for somebody earning 25 to 50,000 if they're paying for that larger size house. So the question is, can we make smaller houses? Okay, here comes the excitement while I try to figure out how to scroll this Windows thing.
Should be the little bar there at the bottom.
Bar at the bottom. Okay,
Yeah, there you go.
there we go. Bar at the bottom, bar at the side. There we go. Okay. Let's see if I can make this a little pinch bigger, even if we have to scroll a bit. Is that a little more legible?
Yep.
Okay. Up at the top, we have annual household income, and for a two-person household at 80% area median income, so the two greens, a two-person and 80%. That number is a federally derived number. They update it annually. This year, it is 50,500. So again, you notice that it's right there at the cutoff of that other set of data. And for way back in history, the feds defined an affordable housing payment as 30% of gross income. That's the $12,063 would be a monthly affordable housing payment for somebody earning 50,500. Now you can say, well, it isn't comfortable for me. It isn't affordable to me because of whatever other things in your life. And I understand that. This is just sort of working from the federal numbers. So then I'm going to back down out of that 1263 to find how much could go to principal and interest to pay for a loan. And taxes, these percentage numbers are kind of rules of thumb from lenders. Of your housing payment, 12% will go to taxes, 5% will go to home insurance, 8% will go to private mortgage insurance. Private mortgage insurance, if you don't put in 20% down, you end up having to pay this extra insurance piece. And we're going to see how the land trust plays in this story in just a second. Then the land lease and the homeowners association, these are numbers that are specific to Musk Affordable Housing Trust. We don't sell the land, we lease the land to the house at $75 a month. And in this cluster of houses that the U of I has, there's a bunch of shared resources. And those shared things, we created a homeowners association at $25 a month, mostly thinking it's going to be snow removal kinds of activities that the homeowners association will engage in. And the federal way of thinking about it does not include utilities in the cost of, and same with lenders. They don't back out the utilities when they're doing it. But you could put that in and think about it. So what I get then is a grand total of the expenses here. And when you subtract that from the 1263, you get the 948. And then we can take anybody's guess what interest rates are right now. I think they've edged down below 6.5 for a mortgage. Depends on your credit score, depends on, yeah, right. I see Sue going, all right, it's floating around. And if I ask you what that number is 12 months from now, right. It's an even harder guess. Anyway, using those and a 30-year mortgage, this borrower could potentially borrow $149,000. And then if you say, well, we're going to put a 3% down payment on, there's $4,000. So the total buying power of this household earning $50,000, affordable buying power is $154,000. And then I'm going reversing directions now, saying, okay, let's deduct the land cost. And right now it's sitting at 0. So the improvements could cost $154,000. And then we say, well, what's the construction cost per foot? Anybody's guess on that? Because I have more fixed costs are a greater percentage of my total costs.
250 is low or?
250 is low.
50's low if you're 600 square feet because you still have kitchen square footage that's expensive. You still have a bathroom. You still have an electrical service. You still have all the really expensive
All the
items.
expensive parts are in the house. Yeah. And the inexpensive living room is not. Yeah.
Or the extra bedroom.
The extra bedroom, right.
Yeah,
So-
I know when we stopped when we separated the upstairs of our building from the downstairs, the city said we had to have a separate water line, and they wanted to charge us $5,500 for that.
Mhm.
How much does it cost for a water hookup?
Yeah, with the water meter and the construction, of course, being a variable,
Yeah.
but the water meters, the service, yeah, $5,500 is right about what it is.
Whether it's 600 feet or 4,600 feet.
Right, whether it's McMansion or a tiny house, it's the same money. Right, so there's the fixed costs that burden the small house. Anyway, so using the 250, I get to a house that's 618 square feet, paid for by the mortgage. Okay, we're in the small house business here. That's just 18 square feet bigger than the maximum ADU, right?
Yeah.
At
right.
600? Yeah, okay. And take all of those numbers with a grain of salt, right?
Right.
They give you a picture, but you couldn't take them to the bank. Let's see what happens if we put in a land cost, and let's put in a cheap land cost.
That ruins it though.
29,000?
Well, let's say you could buy a lot for 80 and split it and have a $40,000 piece for this tiny house. Look what it did to house size. We're now down to 393.
Wow.
And the other thing that it did that cost was what happened when I took the land cost out. I'm using the rules for community land trust lending. And what the Fannie Mae will do is they'll say, oh, we will count the value, get an appraised value of the land. We will count the land as part of the down payment.
Oh,
And so my goal is to make the land plus the buyer's down payment greater than 20% of the package. So now they're borrowing less than 80%. So now PMI goes away. So the presence of the land trust land in the deal gives the buyer more buying power because it takes that 101 for the PMI, that one there, it takes that out when I put the 0 in here. Okay, return. There. If you said, Well, I need a larger house than the 618 square feet. Right, so we're back to, there's the 250, there's the 618. I want 1,200 square feet of house. Well, sure, we can do that. This is the amount, based on that same cost per square foot, that's the amount of subsidy that has to be added to the project to get to that bigger house. And, you know, I look at that going, well, that's a lot to ask the community for. Why are we building that 1,200 square foot house? If the community could have built 2 houses at 600 square feet and sold them, we might be further down the road. That isn't to say that there aren't households with several children that need a larger house. That's a different kind of problem that we need to approach finding a solution to. But I came to this partly because in the first 6 houses that the Housing Trust did, 2 of them, they were all 3-bedroom. One was a 2-bedroom. 5 were 3-bedroom houses. 2 of the 3 bedrooms were purchased by single individuals.
By who?
Single individual.
Single household, single person household. Which is not to say that there wasn't a partner, there weren't children, there weren't all these other things in the offings. But when the offer came in, it's a single individual going to be on title in a 1-person household. And that's what caused me to start digging into the data for household size and number of bedrooms and seeing this big mismatch in the current inventory and asking, is there something that we can do differently to try to meet the needs of a number of households that are smaller with smaller houses? And then can we get those smaller houses to require less subsidy?
My mind just went over to the size of the house, and I don't think I've heard you explain, how did you figure the size of this house? How did the attic space or the upstairs space, is that considered as part of your square footage? Based on, in other words, there's a square, there's a square of the house or the rectangle, and then there's going up into the attic or into the loft.
Right, right. So those of you who may have seen this first house that the U of I architecture did, it's 570 something square feet on the main floor, and then the back half is an attic with no sidewalls. It is triangular. And so Nels's question is about how to think about that. It has a pull-down ladder to get up to it, and it has almost no headroom over 7 feet. So we called it on the plan storage. The owner is using it for more than storage.
I would too.
And I have a concern because it really is not very accessible with that ladder situation, and it folds down into the middle of the bedroom, and so it's undesirable to use it the way they're using it.
90% of the population, actually, I suppose.
Right. So, but what we have said as a design team is we weren't able to sell that space. It didn't contribute to the price for the sale. We're not going to do that again.
Does that contribute to liability insurance if you are using an attic for something other than storage and there's no exit other than?
I don't know how the home insurance folks
Yeah, but
would look at
who
that.
carries the liability for that? The homeowner?
The homeowner does.
Okay, well then, yeah, you're off the hook for that. My question is, when you were doing the information from the county, on two-person households, one person. Were these homeowners or renters or what?
Physical inventory. These are houses that exist on the
Okay.
tax assessor's records.
Okay, so that doesn't count
I asked them to
RV
exclude.
park, like Robinsons.
Right.
How
right.
many people?
I
live-
asked them to give
per
me
household?
actual houses,
Okay,
right? Not RV parks, not
Manufactured
apartment
home parks.
buildings,
Okay.
not,
Yeah, it'd be interesting to do a manufactured home slash trailer house on figures and see how that would compare. Be just to kind of get a feel for that.
because in some sense, that's my competition.
Yeah, in my whole life here in Moscow, you're at 6s and 7s with the manufactured homes. Somehow Jim Robinson had this idyllic place that you could see yourself living in, and most other trailer parks did not feel that way. And as in architecture, we often we seem to be at 6s and 7s about extolling the virtues of inexpensive living or making fun of people who live in.
no, I was just thinking about numbers of occupants of, lower income families that might have 3 kids or whatever. I know my sister in the early 90s, mid 90s, spent $100,000 for a manufactured home in Robinsons. So, and that was then. So, and that was, with the codes, because, after a lot of those used to be trailers, but they're permanent. After a certain year cutoff, you couldn't get a mortgage on them because the electrical and stuff wasn't up to code. But so I'm thinking, I was just wondering, you have all these 2-person households and these 1-person households, and I think there's probably a lot more 5-person households, but they don't show up in the houses.
Yeah, 3 kids don't pay taxes.
But they would show up in the city survey.
Well, except the survey was 24% of people returned them. So,
Okay, but Cody, what do you think the average household size is in Moscow?
Average household size? Well, I mean, for some of the housing needs, they look at what, 2.5, 2.25, something like that per house.
Right. So I think there may be
Okay.
some more, but it's not as far as you may be arguing.
okay, I'm just wondering.
Right. Not to say that there aren't larger households and that those households don't deserve affordable housing.
No, I'm not talking about deserving.
Everyone deserves a
Yeah,
chance at an
yeah.
affordable housing arrangement, but there are a lot of much smaller households.
Well, I really am in favor of the smaller footprints because I don't know if you read recent articles about how many 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses are occupied by one widow or one widower because they can't afford to downsize. They can't sell their house and buy a smaller house for,
Or can't find one,
yes,
right? And they're not in my income demographic.
yes,
So I can't
Yes.
build for them.
yes.
But those individuals certainly are scattered all around in the Fort Russell behind us, looking for a solution. Right? So I have a request for you to consider putting on the docket, which would be for these U of I houses. 3 of them are 1-bedroom and 3 of them are 2-bedroom. I am going to 6 houses. I'm going to build 12 parking places. If this were an apartment, I would be able to count parking places based on bedrooms in the apartment building, and I would get to 9. So by making houses, the way the code is structured right now, I am building more parking stalls. which is driving up my costs. So it would be a matter of saying, that you would find some variation in terms of houses below a certain size. ADUs, you only require one parking stall. I'm building things the size of ADUs and building 2 parking stalls. So it'd be something I'd ask you to ruminate on as to whether there would be a change in the code.
Because stalls, parking spots are based on bedrooms, right?
They're based on house,
On a house
in the
for
case of
single-family home.
single-family houses,
Yeah,
not
but
based
it's
on
like-
bedrooms.
It's like the utilities where you have to pay the same amount to get a utility into
Six
a big
for
house or
six,
a
that's just
little
two
house.
for.
And if you have a little house, they still have one car,
These are
2
just
cars,
single-family
whatever it
because they're
is.
detached.
So just because it's a little house doesn't take that away.
I'm asking you to reconsider that.
Okay. I have a question of Cody. Is a dwelling unit still considered 800 square feet?
ADUs can be even smaller. Yeah. We don't have a minimum size for
Okay,
a dwelling unit. But
There
I
was.
think Nils is using the standard that we use for multifamily, for apartment complexes, where it's a sliding scale for parking based on number of bedrooms. Where these are just regardless of size, considered detached,
Right.
single family
These
homes.
are detached
For the
single-family
purposes
homes,
of- For the
right?
purposes of parking.
Right.
So what's the requirement for a one bedroom
House.
house?
2.
Two.
And 5-bedroom
No, but
house,
I-
2.
Yeah, in an apartment, it's one.
You're gonna get a lot of argument from neighbors, and they're not wrong,
Mhm.
that apartment, it used to be a one bedroom, one person was in it. It's not like that anymore, and it's not like that in student town, where you have 3 students in a 1-bedroom house. Or they all have boyfriends and girlfriends, and so,
As renters or as owners?
we have a lot of renters.
I'm
And we
dealing with
have a- We
owners.
have an increasing number of ones that are coming in and buying here, or mom and dad buys it.
Mom and dad buys it.
Well, Nils, do you think, or this would be, anybody could, a response to this, do you think there are many people who live alone? In other words, you said, well, this is a one-person house. That might be reported that way, but I'm just asking myself, how many people in the world live alone?
Where they don't show up on the, yeah.
And it's a different, it's just a kind of a sociological thought of, and as you know, various, I do have a series of friends that are single and apparently do live alone. I don't know about who might be sharing, but I'm trying to think of requirements for those spaces, because a car seems to go with every human being 16 and over.
Oh, I'm not so thrilled about reducing the number of parking spaces, but I would be more interested in maybe the city subsidizing one of the extra spaces. Because as we know with the there's identity and whatever, that there's many, many cars and they're taking up space all over town. So I agree that it shouldn't be that expensive, but I'm not so wowed about. Maybe the requirements of the parking could be less, like not have to be hard paved, maybe gravel or having the city. But reducing the cost, I'm really in favor of. It's just space.
So you might be interested to look at City of Lewiston's tiny home community. Is that what they call it? They've amended their zoning code to allow clusters of tiny homes, which they're somehow distinguishing from clusters of mobile homes. And they are, there's fairly light parking requirements that go with it. I think it's one spot per tiny home plus some fraction
Guests.
that are guest, kind of guest
Ratio.
parking, little extra on.
Mm.
And Cody, I don't know if you've looked at it. It seems to me that there was even a way that some on-street parking could count for some of that.
I'm not familiar with,
Or maybe they allowed you to just do a wide curb cut and put in.
yeah, I'm not familiar with Lewiston's, but I know, Boise, my previous life before we left, some of the ADUs and the multifamily stuff, if on-street parking was adjacent to the site and not in a restricted, residential parking district or something like that, they would allow a percentage of those to count towards an overall parking requirement. If you had a tiny home village of, I don't know, 30 units, 30 homes or something like that, and you had on-street parking there adjacent to the property, wasn't signed for anything else, maybe 20, 30, a percentage of those could count towards your requirement.
Could count as a
So-
requirement.
So
Right.
there's ways to do that.
Because
In
we're,
areas where you have higher density concentrations of people, like if you acquired property right by Identity where there's already such a demand on on-street parking, maybe doesn't work as well as a situation, more on the edge of town where people don't rely so heavily on, the public on-street parking.
Yeah,
So
we
you kind of have to be-
we have it on Third as well with Elysian, with the apartments there. And so we're really right in that kind of an area. And so I'm very used to the New York style of every curb in my neighborhood is parked on every day, period. I
it's just
mean,
first come,
And the
first
street's
served.
wide enough so they don't have to say no parking because of snow on each side, on one
well,
side?
we have some, when the city has made the snow thing, so Hayes doesn't get parking on both sides.
Right.
But Third Street, which isn't considered to be quite as demanding for some reason, is we're parking on pretty much. I don't know, maybe we only have parking on one side of that too. Now Blaine gets, you know what they're like because we all drive on them and it means you drive a lot more carefully. I wanted to go to a different area and ask you a question in a different, in building.
okay.
Have you considered a manufactured pod? I know that this project has some great benefits to have the students working on it and students learning from it. And I really honor that. That's great. But from a cost standpoint,
You mean the rail car pods?
what?
You mean like the stacking of the rail cars?
Well, what I'm thinking of is, I don't know if you know the company Katera. It was a big multi-million-dollar company here 2 or 3 years ago, getting ready to change the building world. And it had a factory in Seattle and Phoenix, and Katera, something happened and it went belly up and got sold. But I just there's a factory in Spokane right now. Mercer is the name of it,
Okay.
and they are working on building these prefabricated tiny houses that get everything put together in a factory in a sort of a 12 by 12 pod, or forget the figure 12, 13, 14. I don't know what the pod is for sure. And this is all related to mass wood issues of trying to get away from concrete and heading toward green. But I just visited just this last week next to the Mercer factory in Spokane. It's actually between out at Liberty Lake. They're building a example, this happens to be a little larger house than what you're talking about, but they're building a 3-story small house. I think it's going to be like 11 or 1,200 square feet, but these pods are built in the factory. All the power and pipes and everything are in the wall, built into the wooden structure, and it comes in this 12-foot thing. And then you just bring it out on a truck and glue, bolt these 2 things together, and then bolt 4 things together. It's like Legos, basically. And I have one of my students and a brilliant young architect from the University of Idaho just happens to be a executive in this company. And I'm wondering, I don't know much about it because I'm out of touch. I'm just an old guy who doesn't know what's going on with Mass Wood. But I wondered if you've had a chance to think about it at all. It begins to make me wonder if would be a way to enhance this small house activity, and instead of building 6 houses, build 60 of these things that come from the factory, and maybe, I don't know, maybe could be, the cost could be, in other words, these houses that I've looked at, I don't know how they're going to deal with sheetrock, yet. I was in it this last weekend, but it isn't to that finished level yet. So I'm just not sure. But, and they said they'd kill me if I took a picture of it. Apparently this is all secret stuff that Mercer's a German corporation that is in Europe. They're apparently working on these things. Anyway, I'm just bringing it up because if you were interested in it, I'd like to introduce you to somebody who knows more about it, and you might want to think about it.
Right. So I would like an introduction, and I'll tell you the path I have gone down. I explored the modular housing market. So we've got manufactured trailers and modular, which are built to the local building code standards and intended to be dropped onto a real foundation. And there's a dealer in Lewiston out by the casino. You'll see the units set up, showroom set up out there. I spent considerable time with them, the dealer, and then with the factory in Caldwell. And
Was that Indie Dwell?
no, not Indie Dwell. It'll come to me. Yeah. I wanted to do twin homes. I have a whole bunch of lots that are long and skinny. They were designed for twin homes. I wanted to do modular twin homes. And the learning was, so I met with Justin, our building inspector, and I said, here's the cross section of one of their units. And it was a shed roofed one. So I said, we'll just take 2 of them, 2 shed roofs. We'll get a gable roof. It'll be 2 houses. And we need a 2-hour firewall. Well, the easy way to do that is with a product called Shaft Liner. It's a 2-inch material. It's used for lining elevator shafts. But it's recognized as the solution. Okay, so we got on the phone and sent them a drawing and said, it looks like your 2 things, they are just exactly 1.5 inches apart from each other, and there's shaft liner down the middle. Can't do it. Shaft liner is not on the factory floor. Can't. the learning, and so then we said, okay, back up. Sheetrock is on the factory floor. We will assemble the effect of shaft liner by you screwing layers of sheetrock to the side of this building. So we got past that. But on the roof deck, you need 4 foot of fire-rated plywood for your roof decking. Fire rated plywood is not on the factory floor. And we are not going to have it on the factory floor, so we can't.
And the factory being this place. in
This place in Caldwell, right. So they are geared up to do, they said, we can do a duplex. We can get a 1 hour wall for you. So I started down that path. I said, okay, I'll do a duplex and then I'll condoize it. Knowing all the nightmares that I was going to open up going down that path. And so I went, but their duplex was end to end rather than side to side. Okay, that's what the factory could produce. So I'm learning you can only ask for what any color as long as it's black, Henry Ford's motto, right? Okay, I'll take your duplex that's end to end with the 1 hour firewall and then I'll condoize it. I go to my federal funding source and say, hey, here's an idea. This is what I want to do. No can do. We want to see houses on legal lots. So the twin home works fine for them. But turning sideways and going across was just a non-starter for the federal funds. So, right. I've gone down a few blind alleys. So I'd like an introduction. I'd like to see what these folks can do. The U of I's project is doing detached houses. I don't think that's as efficient as it could be. And so I'd really like to do twin homes or townhouses.
I've been, like I said, I'm out of touch. I've been 12 years away from the architecture studio, and so I'm not keeping up. But this young man that I'm in touch with, he's had this experience with Katerra, and the fact you guys don't know about Katerra is interesting. It shows you how far out in the country we really are in Moscow, because Katerra is a big name in the West Coast, LA, Phoenix, San Francisco, and what. I mean, it was a multi-million-dollar deal, the hundreds. And when they broke the deal up, they fired 400 people at a time as the company was dissembling. But so Katerra was out on you could see it online on your computer. They thought it was going to change the world, but apparently they got ahead of themselves.
Well, in California, that'd be a little tough with earthquake standards.
Maybe. But it's designed.
I don't know. I don't know if I wouldn't even react to that. This, I mean, the whole mass wood thing is trying to get away from cement and steel and gluing wood together so that the hot architects in the big cities, I mean, they're talking about 16 and 18 story wooden skyscrapers with this mass wood. And if I'd have thought about it, I'd have brought a piece. I walked out of the house with the piece. I got it. It was, they said I could have it.
So is it like glue lamb? Is it like, it's glue lamb?
It's taking the glue lambs. It's taken what Art Troutner did with the micro lamb, and you can go see, 20 years ago, you can go see where wood was in the rec center here on campus. But they're moving far in other directions. And because cement is such an absolute killer CO2 wise, it's they say like 15% of CO2 is coming from our cement factories all over the world. And so they're really struggling to get to change this. And so they're gluing wood in multifarious ways. And then with computers and factory drills, you can go into this hunk of wood and drill out stuff and put electrical lines and water lines and everything in there. And so the bathroom's all made before it ever gets to the house. It's just, this, you can imagine thinking about.
Of course, your student labor was cheap, right?
$15 an hour, but
Oh.
yes, it wasn't journeyman rates, but it wasn't free either.
Oh, it wasn't for either. Okay.
Yeah, well, and I worry about that because the idea of the students working on this seems so important to me.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, just from I don't know where this Mercer company, and I'll get you more information. It is out there online, but it's so new. And I've been making fun of this young man saying, I don't even know what you do. What the hell? And so, this weekend he said, okay, we're going out to the factory. And so I'm going to have a tour of the factory in the next couple of months. Apparently you can have a tour if you don't take pictures. But this is a big German firm, and I haven't looked up Mercer at all.
Okay.
But if I'll work.
I'll give you a card as a reminder. Yeah.
Anyway, that's just.
So how much did you sell this house for?
The first Uva house,
Yeah.
right, 127,000.
So it was under the 154 or whatever.
Well, that's a two-person.
It's a two, oh, I see. I'm sorry. I know this is an imaginary house. I was just
Right,
wondering.
not right, but it's worth doing. Drops the income down to 44,
Uh-huh.
and it drops the purchase price down to 133 here.
But you actually sold it for less.
Right. Well, of course, all of these are sort of estimated numbers.
Right.
I'm not sure what he got for an interest rate.
So I guess what I'm saying is you were able to sell it as an affordable house.
Yes, I had to. So if he'd had a 6.75 interest rate, now we're down to 129.
Yeah.
So it's really sensitive to interest rate. And when we started the project back last May,
You thought you'd have.
I was doing math with 3%, you know?
Throw that in there, see what it looks like.
So, yeah, so that's the idea. And, you know, the higher the interest rate, the less that the buyer can come up with for payment. And so that just becomes the sort of calculus that I end up trying to deal with.
Are any of your potential houses available with VA or is this with first-time home buyer? I guess they have to put less down or VA loans or,
So a VA loan would be okay. FHA loan would be okay.
but I mean, is there an advantage? Do things get cheaper with a VA loan or just?
For some buyers, it will be advantageous. For some veterans, it would be advantageous to go VA. But for some others, it might not, depending on their credit score. It's a complex soup of stuff that
That's
goes
what I'm asking you
together.
because you've done all this research.
I call up a banker and help me out here.
Okay. Yes, I just think it's wonderful what you're knocking your head against the wall for all the rest of us who will wish you well.
Well, where do you think it seems like a lot of work. You get a little red or a gold star from me, but it seems like it might be more work than a normal developer would want to do. You're really, it's like clock building and not like just even
Second that.
building a home. So it'd be hard. So I guess what I'm trying to ask you as the months go by is, where do you think this is going? This is really intriguing and good. you know, I've said before, we need 60 things, not 6 of them. And you know that too.
I know that too. What I am trying to do is minimize the community's subsidy per house. Because the more subsidy per house, the more money I have to spend time raising before I can even build a house.
Right.
And so the three unit townhouse on Southview that we did, we sold in 2020. By the time the accountants had finished, there was $100,000 of subsidy in each one of those units.
Wow.
You know, I mean, the accountants do whatever they do for math and stuff comes out at the other end. But I knew that I was constantly raising and putting in money to make that project work. And to the point where there were times where we'd signed a contract and I wasn't absolutely sure that there was enough money to get the job done. And that's, I don't want to do that again. With the U of I house, I knew there'd be some cost overruns, but I knew I had enough money to get the job done. We could learn and not have the cost overruns next time. But so that's the problem, is that the more subsidy that goes in, the more expensive it is for the community, their bigger investment, and therefore the more money that has to be raised, and therefore the slower the process. So if I can shrink that down, I can move faster.
Just seems like it's to my little simple mind, when I try not to ask about rules and regulations or something, you just see these duplexes and townhouses, small ones that we're building, and you keep thinking, my God, they can't be that terribly expensive. Why are we still acting like there's a housing shortage, and yet everybody's shouting it at the top of their lungs all across America, which certainly seems an indictment on our system. Is everybody in the world, I suppose has everybody always been short of housing for people? You know, is there a sociologist in the room? Somebody who would like to speak to that?
I have a question that I can't remember if it's what they call it. It's not Title IX. It's the subsidized housing.
Section 8.
Section 8.
Mhm.
Okay. Can that be applied towards your small houses?
Section 8 is a rental subsidy.
Oh, so you have to own it. The trust has to own it.
So the trust would, if the trust went into the rental business,
Yeah.
and community land trusts do
Mm-hmm.
go into the rental business and to the mixed use business,
Mm-hmm.
then we could be a landlord and we could take Section 8 vouchers.
No, but then you have to have the liability and all that as the homeowner. Yeah.
Then we're the landlord
Yeah,
and
yeah.
pick up all that.
Yeah.
And not that we don't need to think about affordable rentals, but there's a desire by folks to own something. And affordable rentals don't fill that desire.
And as I recall, they can sell their tiny home. You still own the land, but they can sell it.
The ground lease that connects me to the buyer
Mhm.
has 3 really important provisions. The lawyers wrote it, so it's long, right? But it's got 3 things I care about. You must live in the house,
Mhm.
so you can't move out and
And you
then start renting.
turn it into an Airbnb. Yeah,
You
okay.
must live in the house. You must sell to another income qualified buyer.
Mhm.
And the sale price, the maximum sale price, is controlled by a formula based on the price that you paid. It inflates at 2% a year. It doesn't do what the real estate market does. The hope is that wages
Can't flip
inflate.
it- You can't flip it in 6 months for 100,000 more.
No, the hope is that the wages are going up at 2% a year. so that when you come time to sell to the income qualified buyer, that person exists. Because we kept the price down. Another way it's called is shared equity. So our equity is, of course, immovable, it's in the land, but that we are storing some of that appreciation value.
Because the land value goes up.
Presumably the land value is
Yeah.
going up, right,
They ain't making any more of it, so.
Right.
Yeah.
right.
Okay. I'm up to speed, finally.
Joel.
Two issues. I'm not even sure if they relate to the kinds of things you're dealing with, but I think they do relate to affordability. One, I think it was in this commission many years ago, we talked about or saw mention of ideas for housing in which a moderately small house is built on a lot with more room, with the expectation that eventually the occupant would see free to expand the house in sight. The possibility of growing the house in sight from something that starts perhaps more affordable. Reactions to that as a
Yeah, two at least reactions. One, the half-built house, the architect is South American, I think. They were actually building the frame concrete and then infilling only half and leaving. So what the architect left, what was sold to the first buyer, was a half a house. But the structure and frame was there, all the utilities were there, such that, and then somebody wanted a garage, somebody wanted this, somebody wanted that, and they filled it in.
2 more bedrooms or whatever.
2 more bedrooms. The unfinished basement is or unfinished attic is the half-built house in the vernacular that we would understand. You may remember the house that the trust did up on Morton Street before we were acting like a land trust, so we sold it fee simple. That is a 2-bedroom house. The back door was placed, and the house was placed on the lot with the thought that either you could build a garage, you could build a garage with a bedroom master suite up above the garage, or that you could just extend out and add a bedroom on the ground level and move the back door. So we did actually design that house to be expandable.
It seems to me that the those modules might be a good starting place.
Buy 2 modules and the owner can add the third or whatever.
Or one module and you attach a bedroom to it for your starter home.
Right.
Maybe.
Right. So the project that the U of I students are doing is sufficiently space constrained between lot setbacks and fire separations and all. Those units are not expandable.
But why aren't we doing that? Why are we building $500,000 houses for the first house built on the lot?
We are maximizing the value on the lot. And because if you're trying to, if you look at me trying to squeeze a turnip here, if you wanted to make money, you would put more house on there and spread your fixed costs over more variable costs. And it's a better way to have a chance at a return as a developer. But yeah, so we're building neighborhoods to the point that they can't really, though once we added the ADU, we've now opened up across the city the potential that those neighborhoods aren't built to completion, that they could add ADUs.
Do you know what ADUs are?
Oh, you're speaking to the students?
Yeah, I speak to the students.
We're only in week 5 of our class, so yeah, it caught me off guard. So
Accessory dwelling unit, otherwise known as a granny flat in the
Or
house,
mother-in-law.
in the backyard or something.
Ah,
So, you take the garage and you turn it into granny's apartment, or maybe your student is going to school now,
Oh.
or you could even rent it.
So it's a thing that cities all over America, and certainly here in Idaho, even in Idaho, have thought to do these ADUs, hoping that it would help solve the problems that NOS is working on of, of building an inexpensive unit over a garage or next door on a property. And so for a small thing of 600 square feet that somebody can live in and be a starter for their life.
Or like an elderly person that wants to stay in their house and needs someone living on the property who can help.
I do have a question based on what you're saying. So if you are having those three conditions where they have to live there, what happens whenever you have a young person in their 20s, mid-20s, that gets married? So you're gonna bring your wife into that house, and then what's gonna happen when you have a child? Are you gonna be forced to sell? Is there gonna be a condition on how many people can live there?
Okay, good question. Right. So yes, it is a small house and life happens to people and they add partners and children and all of those sorts of things. And I think the thing is they're not forced to sell, but once that child becomes mobile in a little one-bedroom house, it's probably not enough house. So I view it as a starter house.
So what you were saying is that the person who has the house has to live there. It means it's owner occupied.
It's owner
It
occupied.
doesn't mean that's the maximum number of people who could live there.
You don't want to turn it into a slumlord buys it and rents it out and is making a killing. It's to make it affordable for people in those ranges that need it.
Which makes sense. It just brings up the question as to, is there gonna be anybody in charge to make sure there's only X number of people just because of everything else that comes in with overcrowding a place? How is that gonna be monitored?
I'm in charge. And I actively don't care how many people live in the house. That's the owner's problem.
Just as long as the owner lives there.
The owner must live there, and the owner can have cousins and
Dogs.
stuff, right? The U of I house got 2 cats in it already. That's the prerogative of being an owner.
You said everybody needs a home, even the cats.
But is
I'm
there
not a
any
cat person.
conditions, I guess the health department, or I don't know what unit would be in charge of making sure, like for instance, I have a 4-bedroom house.
Okay.
And I do rent to students, right?
Okay.
But there's a limit on how many people I can have in my house. When I had my children, we had 6 children, only 4 of them lived with us, so we were fine. But there's always that that you can't have too many people because the neighbors are gonna complain and they're gonna call somebody, and then somebody's gonna come and check on you because you're violating some rules, whatever they could be, right? And so what is the standard or the protection?
Do we have a rule?
For unrelated people.
Yeah, what's ours, 5?
Oh, unrelated people.
Unrelated.
Yeah,
people.
Yeah, if they're
You can have as
related,
big a
you have
family
12
as you
kids, you
want.
can live in, they can all live in the house. But if-
Yeah.
Unrelated.
but if they're unrelated,
Then there's a rule.
I think it's 5, isn't it?
It's one family and 5, yeah,
Life is complex.
it's one family and what?
5.
One family plus 5.
No, what?
The one
Or
family
five-
or 5.
Or 5 unrelated.
Five.
One family or 5 related.
Unrelated.
Unrelated.
No
Family.
more than 5.
Yeah, family.
Right.
Family of unlimited size.
Unlimited
Five
size.
One more question. Have you, based on the design that you're talking about, it's a 618 square feet, it's very tiny, right? So you're talking about having probably a 1-bedroom and a little kitchenette or something like that. Have you considered leaving the possibility of building a 2nd story for just 1 more bedroom, just in case? Say, for instance, you have an elder person that it's capable of living on their own for 10 years. But there comes a time whenever they have to have assistance. What do we do in those situations? Do we give them an opportunity to have somebody there taking care of them?
So the project with the University of Idaho is unique in that it's being shaped by learning goals, amongst other things. And they have decided that they are not going to do multi-story buildings. Students building on second stories, and I mean, just you can add all the wrinkles and problems to it. So that group of houses, because of who's doing the work, will not be two-story. I am considering a two-story design. 2 bedrooms upstairs, living room, kitchen downstairs, stairs and bathrooms kind of in the middle. One of the commitments that I have when I use federal money is at a minimum, it is what's called visitable, which is a wide entry door, no stairs to get to the door, and an accessible, not ADA, but an accessible bathroom, wide enough door and maneuverable space in there. But visitable doesn't require the bedrooms to be accessible. Fair housing is the next step up. Fair housing requires that all the living space be accessible. And
No upstairs.
All the living space downstairs.
all the
Has
living
to be.
space, period.
Really?
Fair housing. They're basically aimed at apartments.
I see.
But it means you can't do a townhouse type apartment like Identity did.
Huh.
I'm sorry that you didn't bring pictures tonight because if I'd thought about calling you, I should have done because I knew not many people had gone to see it. But one thing about this little project, this is being done with an architecture department. That means this little house is a piece of art.
It's a school
This-
project.
This is not, if we can walk across the street over here on the other side of Jackson and see some 2-story, 10 little nice infill housing that are not art. But these little houses these are architecture students and architects who want to serve humanity in a very artful way.
Minimalistic
And so
way.
that gets in the way of some of your questions.
Well, I understand that because I used to work at the university and I worked with some students too and did some projects like some competitions and they had the little cube housing, which is like a Lego type of thing.
Mhm.
And so my next question was going to be, so this is just an experiment. Is that correct? Or can I call it that way? If it
Probably.
works, then we get another grant, we get help. Because whenever we think about investing on $150,000, let's say your 2-bedroom more expensive model, right? So whenever you think about it, right now with the prices, every bedroom in any housing looks like every bedroom costs $100,000, right? And so we're trying to help people, then building the foundation is the most expensive part. So are you in a position where you can influence the students eventually to say, this is a great model, however, we could add this possibility? Or are you more constrained into saying, let's build the model that you have, let's wait 10 years and see what happens? Or do you have any input in that?
My agreement with the university is to not unreasonably interfere with what they're doing.
Now, I think that can be a next step for Nels. But this group of 6 houses, you may or may not think this is a piece of art, as I described, but I believe it is. And consequently, and if you had gone in the house, it's pretty cool. And so, while this is not walking into a cheesy little 30-year-old duplex. This is really, and the bathroom is cool, and the attic space, it's not for somebody like me who's 85 and can't go upstairs, even though I think it's my favorite room up there. They were upstairs. I was up there. Yeah, so I have an emotional attachment because just a piece of my own trivia. I spent the first 6 years in my father was a on the road tent evangelist. And I lived in a 200 square foot trailer for the first 6 years of my life. My mother and my father and me and a couple of people who worked for my father. And so we had 5 people living in 200 square feet. So I'm not as shocked by people who don't think they can live in small spaces. Though we always had a tent, we were always making a big religious tent. So we had some room to, we didn't have a toilet, but so we had to dig a little hole in the ground somewhere. That's how,
That wasn't a different era, though.
that's a different era.
That was just last
That was
week.
before
Come on.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you.
So, and do you understand that the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust is an entity? And this is a particular project that they have partnered with the university. Some of the other things, when he's talking about the Southview 3 homes that out there, those are different projects.
Okay.
They're not tied to the university, but.
They have more freedom,
They have, yeah. And
more choices.
more choices, but but he does have to use the model where they own the land, lease the land.
So the university is the one who owns the land. Okay.
No,
No,
the trust owns
The
the
trust
land.
owns the land.
That's part of that partnership.
Right, I'm making the land available for the university's project.
And so will they be paying you or?
I wish.
To the trust. I mean, if the trust owns the land
That was it.
and
That's
they are
a
going to
big
be
question.
buying the
The house,
building,
they don't own the
but
land.
not the land,
That's
They
right.
rent the land.
they rent the land. Okay, okay.
That's what keeps it affordable.
Yeah, the
But what
price
is
of
the
that.
rent price? Is it calculated into your spreadsheet?
$75 a month.
Cheap rent.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I be next in line?
You can. See my realtor, she's building a list.
My second question relates to land development costs. Why don't we build more one-way streets?
Oh,
in
please,
residential
let's.
neighborhoods?
I'm all for it. Narrower, only sidewalk on one side, cut
Well,
down the whole profile, save a lot of land, save a lot of developer cost. Yes.
well, God bless Walter Steed, but his idea of Lewiston had all these plastic garbage cans and just put them out in the street. Well, they don't have snow. And you put narrower streets and you put the garbage cans out in the street and you put the snow and it's just a disaster.
It didn't say narrower streets to
I did.
that extent. But I don't believe we actually have, as a city, a street profile for one-way streets.
We have alley profiles.
alleys.
I think there
Oh,
may be standards for one ways or
I
through
don't believe there are.
through the through a PUD process, you can look at
Yeah. Oh, through
flexibility.
the PUD process,
But
probably.
honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
But I'm.
access to trash services, snow
Yeah.
removal.
It's,
So
It's a
the
balance.
Yeah, well, the alleys of the trash department is a big disaster right now.
well,
Hayes Extension is
favorite
your
street.
example. That's the best. The Hayes Extension is
dangerous
our
for me to
best
walk on.
one, don't you think?
mhm.
And it's beautiful. And I don't think there's any problem with, I mean,
I haven't heard
Phew.
of any problem with the garbage cans and
I don't think,
Hayes?
I don't think they have a problem with garbage cans. I wouldn't think so, but it is pretty unique because it's no sidewalk
No
at
sidewalk.
all.
no curb.
Yeah.
and no curb.
Yeah.
And you can just step out as you pick up your paper in the morning, you can actually whisper to your neighbor. I mean, the
No
houses are
safe
that
route to
close.
school.
Huh?
No safe route to school.
But it is a safe route.
Well, I think
Low traffic, low speed.
You don't bike or walk down it very often.
I love biking
Hayes?
down.
I like to walk
do.
down it.
Yeah, Hayes is gorgeous.
I would
South
put some sidewalks on.
Huh?
Talking about South
South
End.
It was sidewalks that got me onto this commission. We
Yeah, I'd probably
were
ride on-
converting
I'm on the-
Orchard Avenue from
Both
gravel
sides of
to,
your street,
to
yeah.
pavement. And this crazy city wanted to put sidewalks on only one side, so I showed up to object. I wanted
They put you on the
sidewalks on both
commission.
sides.
That's right.
And they put me on the commission.
There you go.
That's right.
Can you work on it the rest of the way?
Well,
Yeah.
that needs
Yeah.
to be on the agenda to get out there.
Don't you remember Marshak was always in favor of that? That's what he always thought, because he was so angry about paying all this money for streets that makes developers go broke before they ever build a house, because they have to do all that. And so he thought narrow, and even gravel, he thought.
Well, that's why
Not
infill,
quite willing to do
that's
that.
why infill is such a good idea, because it saves the cost of building new streets
Right.
and new sidewalks.
You can only infill so many times.
Oh, yeah.
But my question is, a properly sized, or width-wise, one-way street with carrying off our current two-way sizes, keeping curbs of some sort and sidewalks.
Tree lawn.
What is the likely investment in land development that might be saved by that? Maybe you're
That's a
the.
really good question, but I haven't calculated that because I know that's not.
So it would be at least one travel lanes
One
worth
travel
of
lane.
asphalt,
Yes.
which is a third of the asphalt, maybe.
Well, maybe more than that.
Depends if you're parking, if you're using it
Depends on
for
if you got a
parking.
bike lane.
Yeah, but I mean,
But the city standard is only parking on one side.
only parking on one side, right?
To that, right?
Right, so you'd have a parking lane and two travel lanes, and now we'd have a parking lane and one travel lane. Roughly a third. So, but we're not going to save on the curb and gutter. We're not going to save on the tree lawn, though we could make it narrower maybe.
That's gonna rip out the sidewalk, making the tree lawn narrower.
And then if we're putting sidewalk on both sides, so it certainly would save something.
How wide is that?
Good question. In this
Travel lane is
hypothetical,
generally 8
5
feet.
feet.
At least 8, typically more like what, 10, 9, 10?
I didn't hear the
Oh,
question.
travel lanes.
Oh, yeah.
10 or 11.
Yeah.
So
Try and track
since
down.
the original plan of this discussion was to drain the swamp, because now we're getting up to our butts and alligators, it was parking you were talking about.
I know.
And I was thinking, what you were talking about in Boise, about if you have the street parking and that can be used as part of.
In certain settings.
And,
yeah.
and if we do not have an ordinance or a part of our zoning code that allows that, that might be something worth looking into.
Potentially. I mean, parking, I've been back here a year, and parking, it's a delicate balance. I mean, personally, I'm all for just let the market take care of itself, parking wise. That's one very, very extreme, example. But
We'll all be parking at your house.
well, you have to have, it has to be very walkable. Moscow is very walkable for the most part. You probably need a little better, more consistent transit service, to facilitate that.
Expanding the
But in
transit
certain locations, it can work. That's certainly not a silver bullet kind of answer. But parking, I mean, you saw the number just for this little home, how much of a cost parking parking outs. There are studies, people talk about in a downtown context, parking garages, that's some magic solution. Those, the last I saw a number, it was like $20,000 a
Per
space.
stall.
Oh,
For a
that's
stall in a
less than
parking
what
garage.
Jerry Sheets was looking at 10 years ago.
Parking is a very expensive
expensive
part of the equation, and it has huge impacts. I mean, you accommodate more cars, you get more cars. You get more cars, you have more traffic.
Well,
have
I think
more
that, I
pollution.
think as the city limits no longer stop at Hayes.
Yeah.
When the city limits stopped at Hayes, you didn't need so much parking. When you have way out by Fairview, when you're going out that far, you're not going to walk in. And so adding public transportation, extending public transportation helps a lot. But depending on how far out. Now, this development isn't that far out. You can actually get to Palouse River Drive and, get into town fairly reasonably. But Identity has just too many people per square foot for the size of the lot. But so I think it's interesting to bring that forward, what you're talking about in Boise. But more parking doesn't necessarily bring more cars, because right now the cars are just taking over the neighborhoods.
I'm still surprised every time I walk by the path by Identity and see that the parking lots in the extreme east end are empty.
Well, also depends when people are leaving town or whatever, but still.
Well, they're always empty every time I've walked by it over several years.
Yeah, well, you pay for parking at Identity.
Yeah.
They don't want to pay. So
Also, they
park
move
on
their
the
cars
street.
to the university lots during the day.
Right.
But anyway,
Thank you. I've had fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I really appreciate the update.
it's really interesting. Do we get university credit since this is a university project?
No. We're just saying that
You
we
back there,
get
too.
credit with our
They
professor,
get
that would be separate.
Well, he'll give you extra credit.
All right, well, we appreciate it. Is there any reports? Commission tomorrow?
Well, I sort of forgot about the meeting and rushed out of the house too quickly to look at, see if I could find an agenda.
All right.
Yep.
Honesty.
There you go.
For tomorrow's agenda.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow's agenda, it'll be
Tomorrow at 4:00 at this table.
election of officers and just some general updates. Yep. No
Okay.
land use matters or anything before them.
All right. Anything from you, Cody, that we need to discuss?
We'll have you
Anything?
back. No.
Any announcements?
Nope.
All right, well,
Next PNC meeting will be canceled, I believe.
Oh, that's right.
okay, so the next meeting will be canceled, so, yeah, it'll be a bit. All
Okay.
right, well, I think the meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Beebe.
Been fun.